300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a jam-packed Wednesday morning. A great show. This is going to be one of the best shows that I've done. Obviously, a lot of Steph Curry, top 5 NBA shooters of all time. My list is coming up. The Rams restore some confidence with a win over the Cardinals. My Malkin's moments are fantastic, but most importantly, I've got a special guest interview coming up at 8:30. Make sure to stay tuned for that. I cannot wait to bring this guest on, but we start with the breaking news out of the NBA. The Warriors beat the Knicks. That's the news, right? No. They did beat the Knicks last night, 105-96, but the headline and the story was that Steph Curry solidified himself as the official greatest shooter of all time last night, passed Ray Allen for the most three-pointers made in NBA history. He now has 2,977 and counting. Absolute spectacle yesterday at Madison Square Garden. And this sounds paradoxical, but sports and life are really antitheses because life is so unpredictable. Every single day, life hands us something new. Life hands us something unexpected. And yet, in sports, so often sports deliver us serendipity. Sports deliver us precise moments happening at the perfect time. You look across the sports landscape when Tiger Woods won his first PGA championship, his first tour win, it came at the Masters in 1997. And after his stretch of dominance through 2008, after all the off-the-course transgressions and the multiple back surgeries, and when it looked like a major had eluded him for over a decade and there were doubts as to whether or not he would ever return to glory in 2019, of course, it was only fitting the first major he'd win post all of those incidences was at the Masters. When Kobe Bryant played his final game at Staples Center in a season in which he was laboring, it was arduous. He looked like a shell of himself, and yet in his final game of his career, he dropped 60 points at Staples Center. Tom Brady recently, it was only fitting that he would throw his 700th touchdown pass against, or record his 700th, not 700th touchdown pass, but record his 700th touchdown against the Buffalo Bills, the team who he has had the most success against over the course of his entire career. It was only fitting that Ray Allen would pass Reggie Miller for the NBA's all-time three-pointers made record against the Lakers in 2011 when their rivalry was at its most contentious point. And it was only fitting that Reggie Miller was on that TNT call. And last night, it was pretty surreal that Steph Curry would pass Ray Allen to break this record at Madison Square Garden. It was only fitting that that was the venue that it would occur at, because that was the venue that really made Steph Curry's career. That game against the New York Knicks in 2013, Wednesday, February 27th, 2013. He drops 54 points at the Garden, makes 11 three-pointers. It was an iconic performance. The Warriors lost, but it was a career high for Steph. No one had ever seen an individual player make 11 three-pointers in a single game, and yet he did that at that specific venue. And leading up to this game, there was so much buzz, so much pent-up anxiety from the crowds, let alone from Steph. We were starting to count down. There was chatter over a week ago when he was 16 three-pointers away. And the scuttlebutt was, wow, what a narrative it would be if Steph Curry passed Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson's record for 14 threes in a single game, en route to breaking the NBA's all-time three-pointers made record. Wouldn't that be something? And then it dropped to 10 when he was at Philadelphia. How special would that be? And then after Philly, it was in Indiana when he had 6 threes to go. Could he accomplish this feat? And it was only fitting that the basketball gods would say, nope, we don't want this to happen in Philly. We don't want this to happen in Indiana. We want this to happen at the Mecca, at Madison Square Garden. And it's just serendipitous that we had that performance and that moment at that venue. And what made it extra special and extra touching was to see the embrace that he had with his teammates, with his family, the hug that he gave his father, the hug that he gave to Ray Allen, the fact that Reggie Miller was in attendance, the fact that his coach at Davidson was in attendance, the fact that it happened at Madison Square Garden, that they stopped the game for 3 minutes to provide him profuse praise and adulation. It was just one of the most special individual moments that I've ever experienced, especially when it comes to the NBA. Because I've said this before, Steph Curry is one of the 4 most revolutionary basketball players of all time. One of the 4 most influential basketball players of all time. Magic Johnson kind of created the showtime, the entertainment. He brought the entertainment value to basketball. It became a spectacle to go watch an NBA game because of Magic Johnson. Michael Jordan globalized the sport. Air Jordan, the marketing, the shoe game. That was all because of Jordan. LeBron engendered more player empowerment, more player mobility. And Steph revolutionized the game with his three-point shooting ability. He basically immortalized the three-point shot. He may have single-handedly transformed the three-point shot into the most valuable shot in the NBA. And that's because of the way that he plays the game. Now you see bigs practicing stepping behind the three-point line and jacking up threes. Why? Because it's a necessity. It's a shot you absolutely have to master if you want any court time. That's just the reality and the nature of the sport now. And the Warriors are just the most artistic basketball team that we're seeing right now. There was a great piece written by Jason Gay, who's a Wisconsin Badger alum, along with myself, of course. And he perfectly summed it up because he drew the comparison between Steph Curry and Roger Federer when he talked about the elegance, the grace, the effortlessness that they both played, the universal appeal, the fact that they're the most beloved athletes across the sports world. And why? Because of that joy, because of that passion. When you watch Steph Curry play, it's not simply the shooting that makes him so special. Obviously, the shooting is spectacular, but it's the unselfishness. It's the ball movement. It's the screens. It's the cuts. It's the joy that he plays with. He has this kind of effervescence about him that is contagious because you see how it rubs off on the team, how willing they are to make the extra pass, how willing they are to set the screens and to run the backdoor cuts and to do all this movement, and the stamina and the endurance that takes. People don't give him enough credit for what he's been able to accomplish. And it was funny because Draymond Green actually made a comment saying that because Andrew Wiggins was the one who set him up for that record-breaking three-pointer. Draymond Green was surprised that Andrew Wiggins passed up that shot. He says that Andrew Wiggins never, ever passes up that shot. But in that moment, he found Steph, and he kind of said it jokingly, that he was willing to give it up for Steph in that moment. And again, obviously a lot of credit has to go to Steve Kerr for the way that he's been able to coach these guys to implement this system. But I think that in large part, the credit has to go to Steph for his willingness to set that tone, to be the leader, to show and be the example for the teammates to follow. And you just see how that spreads and permeates that entire locker room. And of course, they're also the best defensive team in the league. They hold opponents to the fewest points, fewest opponent field goal percentage. They share the basketball. They had 28 assists last night, which was a staple during their championship run when they made 3 NBA Finals appearances in 5 years. Or actually, I should rephrase that. They made 5 consecutive NBA Finals. They won 3 titles in that stretch. So the only difference between 2013 and 2021 for Steph was in that performance back then, the Warriors lost the game versus in 2021 they won. And that was the main difference. And that's perfectly segueing into kind of a fun topic for me, which is to break down, in my opinion, the top 5 NBA shooters of all time. It's only fitting that on, or the night after Steph Curry breaks the all-time three-pointers made record, to give my take on the top 5 shooters of all time in the NBA. This is tough. So I want to give first some honorable mentions because I know I'm not going to mention them in my top 5 and they may garner a lot of attention, but I need to draw a distinction here. So when it comes to the honorable mentions, I have to give shout outs first to Kyle Korver, Dale Ellis, and JJ Redick. I think that those guys would be worthy of making a list like this. Do I have them in my top 5? No, but it's a very subjective thing. And then when it comes to kind of the Kevin Durant's, the Larry Birds, the Damian Lillard, the James Harden, those guys, they have a sweet stroke, but they're more of elite scorers as opposed to predominantly known as being an elite shooter. And I think that there is a difference and and it distinguishes between them and that. So at number 5, I'm going with the pops of Steph Curry, Del Curry. People don't really remember Del Curry much, but this is a guy who at one point for the longest time was the Charlotte Hornets' all-time leader in points. He still is the leader in most three-pointers made. And he played in an era from 1986 to 2002 where the three-point shot wasn't as coveted, wasn't as valued, but his stroke was one of the most beautiful, pure shots in the NBA that we've ever seen. And what distinguished him, in my mind, to those guys like Kyle Korver and to a lesser extent Dale Ellis and even JJ Redick is because, yes, he was an elite spot-up shooter, but this is a guy who could do much more than that. He could drive it to the rim occasionally if you run him off the three-point line. So he wasn't simply a shooter in my mind, but his stroke was absolutely drop dead gorgeous. So I have him at number 5. At number 4, I've got Reggie Miller. It's not just the fact that he's a UCLA alum, and I've got Westbrook's jersey right behind me, so I'm a UCLA fan, but it's because he averaged 39.5% for his career from the three-point line over the course of 18 seasons, averaged 18 points. But this was the first guy to come around. Not only has he made the 3rd most threes in NBA history, but he was the first player to come around who was not only an elite scorer, an elite shooting guard, but an elite three-point shooter as well. His footwork was impeccable. The way he came off screens, he was fearless. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Knicks in 1995, 8 points in 9 seconds. Spike Lee, I think, had a cardiac arrest in Madison Square Garden. That's who Reggie Miller was. The guy was absolutely fearless, and yet at that time, very similar timeline to Del Curry. People didn't appreciate the three-point shot nearly as much. And I have him at number 4. At number 3, and I think that this is subject to change, you can make a strong argument that Klay Thompson should be number 2. The only reason I have him number 3 right now is because the guy I have listed ahead of him at number 2 has played a lot longer. So this is more of a longevity achievement at this point. Klay Thompson, though, can make a strong case to be number 2, and eventually I may push him up to number 2, but the fact of the matter is, regardless, he's a top 3 shooter of all time. This guy is, for his career, a 42% three-point shooter over the course of 8 seasons in which he's actually played. He's extremely clutch. The guy can heat up faster than anyone I've ever seen. He's got the quickest release from 3 in NBA history. He dropped, obviously, 14 three-pointers in an individual game, 37 points in an individual quarter against the Kings. And he set an NBA playoff record making 11 threes in an elimination game. Game 6 of the 2016 Western Conference Finals, when the Warriors and the Oklahoma City Thunder battled it out in one of the best Western Conference series of all time, in my opinion. It went the distance. Game 6 on the road, Klay Thompson, 41 points, 11 three-pointers in an elimination game at Chesapeake Energy Arena and that hostile crowd. Klay Thompson is amazing. And he's an elite scorer who can also shoot the 3. He can get great elevation. He's got tremendous release. The only reason, again, why I don't have him number 2 is just for the duration that he's been in the NBA. Outside of that, I would say that he probably will eventually move up to number 2 in my book. But right now I have to have him at number 3 because the guy I have at number 2 is Jesus Shuttleworth, a.k.a. Ray Allen. Ray Allen was an unbelievable three-point specialist, but that's the thing about him. Over 19 seasons, really, a career 40% three-point shooter, but he was much more than simply a spot-up shooter. This was a guy who came off screens, off curls, perhaps better than anyone. He got his shoulders squared. I think the best that I've ever seen an NBA shooter get their shoulders squared. That's how you get that three-point shot off. You have to be balanced. Your footwork's got to be tremendous. Oh, the Wi-Fi cut off for a minute, but we're back. Apologies for that. So he had obviously just set the three-point mark. He was the torchbearer for a decade, and he was one of the clutchest three-point shooters that we had ever seen. That Game 6 shot with the Miami Heat against the San Antonio Spurs to force the game into overtime was perhaps the clutchest shot we've ever seen, at least in NBA Finals history. It was arguably the clutchest shot in NBA history. That's how profound of an impact that he had. That's how special that he was. I mean, again, over the course of his 19 seasons, 40% from the three-point line, and he was an athlete. People forget about the bounce of Ray Allen. This guy had hops. This guy was an absolute athlete. And to see him be able to accomplish all that he did was truly special. And so I have him at number 2. Of course, no surprise here at number 1, Steph Curry. We just saw him pass Ray Allen and break his record to set the all-time three-pointers made list, as this is falling down behind me. Even that, can't believe it. We'll drop it off. Don't worry about it. It's fantastic. Steph Curry, he revolutionized the game. But again, what's impressive is the fact that he accomplished this feat in 511 fewer games than Ray Allen. Ray Allen played in the league for 19 seasons. Steph Curry is in his 13th season. He's not even halfway into his 13th season. And yet he's already setting these marks. And again, it's not just it's his ability to score the three in a myriad of ways that makes him so special and so unique. He can spot up, he can come off screens, he can cross you up, he can step back, he can pull up one dribble, pull up, pull up in transition. He can create his own three-point shot. He's got limitless range. Right when he steps past half court, he is a legitimate threat to score. The second he steps past half court, he's a threat. The guy has shot over 43% for his career from the three-point line, 43% for his career. And yet what's probably most impressive is not just the fact that he's maintained that level of consistency, but it's the fact that every single season, the volume of three-point shots that he's been attempting has increased along the way. So he's shooting 43%, but the average number of threes he's taking per season is increasing. When he entered the league, he averaged about 4 3-pointers a game. When he was winning his MVP, he was averaging about somewhere between 6 to 9 and 10 3-point shots a game. Now, the guy's averaging about 13 and a half 3-point shots per game, but his efficiency is exactly the same. And that's the true mark of a great shooter, because he is the standard now. Steph Curry is the standard. When we look at guys coming into the league now and we say this guy's an elite three-point shooter or this guy's an elite three-point shooter, we compare them to Steph Curry. And if that's not paying someone the ultimate compliment, then I don't know what is. And again, to see him be able to do that last night in Madison Square Garden was truly special. It was truly special. Okay, so in about a minute from now, my guest is going to be joining me. I just wanted to make a quick point as I close these out right here. For whatever reason, the COVID bug in sports seems to be spreading like crazy right now. We're seeing that the Nets last night played with 7 guys on the NBA's protocols list. The Lakers have like 5 guys missing. The Rams, I think 9 players are missing because of COVID protocol. I forgot that all the commissioners had kind of laid out a little nugget of information, a little foreshadowing a week ago when they said, hey, watch out because COVID and this Omicron is going to infect a lot of people. We didn't exactly know when it was going to happen, but it's crazy that it all came right now across the sports landscape. So many guys gone, and it's just a shame. Just a shame. Okay. So this is my special guest. I'm really excited about this one. I've been trying to get her on. We've been discussing this for quite some time. She was a standout college women's volleyball player at Cerritos, won a state title in 1992, was the California State Player of the Year in 1992, ended up transferring to Long Beach State, where she was a 2-time All-Big West selection, an AVCA second-team All-American, not to mention an All-American with Cerritos, won a national championship with the 49ers in 1993, and was inducted into the Cerritos College Hall of Fame in 2012 in March. And she just finished her 3rd season with Cal Poly Pomona. She is the head coach of the women's program with the Broncos. And with that, my pleasure to bring on to the show head coach Traci Dahl. Coach, good morning. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
Good morning, Jonah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I think I learned more about basketball in this last 10 minutes listening to you than I have in a long time.
Well, I figured volleyball takes place in a gymnasium. Oftentimes the court is versatile for basketball and for volleyball. So it's a learning opportunity across the board.
No doubt, no doubt.
So it's funny, Coach, because your program had such an historic season that I'll touch on, but you started off the year in the preseason not even ranked at all in the preseason. And I remember, and for those who don't know, I had the privilege of calling all of Cal Poly Pomona's home volleyball matches this year. And I remember the first match you guys played at the Broncos Fall Classic. Now, I didn't know that it would end up leading you guys on an 11-match win streak to start the year, but I knew then this team looks really good. And lo and behold, you guys would be ranked within the first official ranking, and you would go on to have a 23-5 overall season, an historically great season, one of the best volleyball seasons at Cal Poly Pomona in the history of their program. You finished a top 25 program. At what point in the year, or how early on in the season, did you know that you had a really special team?
I think none of us knew we were going to go 11-0 in the beginning, and that first tournament really showed the character of the team, the hardworking team that we had. You know, they did a lot of work in the 17 months that we had off, so that really showed its face. And I think a lot of the work was done also in July. We were able to come back for about a month before the season started, which typically is not the case. So the whole team committed to doing that. And so we actually had like about a month's worth of practice before we had to actually start season. So I would say after the second week, the coaching staff and I started looking at the team. We thought, you know, we've got a really balanced group here, and everybody can come in and step in and play and help us win at any time. And I think that was the biggest factor that helped us throughout the season, was every single player was a viable person to put in the game. You know, our practice environment was probably one of the most competitive environments I've ever had in my career as a volleyball coach. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons why we were so successful.
And obviously, you guys ended up reaching the conference championship game in a conference that I think is arguably the toughest, if not one of the toughest conferences in the nation at the Division II level. The CCAA was a gauntlet this year. You qualified for the NCAA tournament as well. And it's interesting because, to me, Coach, volleyball, when it comes to momentum in volleyball, it's such a transient thing, because there are moments when you're on the right side of a kill and you deliver the blow, and in the next instance, you're the one getting pelted in the face by the volleyball. And yet your team throughout the season showed so much composure, but more importantly, I saw a real joy and a real passion, and the fact that the players really seemed to relish playing with one another, which I think is something that is so profound on a volleyball team. Getting a chance to be up close and being on the sidelines, how much fun did you have getting a chance to coach this team when it looked like they were so close?
This year, honestly, Jonah, was super fun for me, you know, and we talked a lot about our team culture early on, and how much passion the girls had for the game, and how much they wanted to win. And we thought, how are we going to make this happen? You know, not only are we athletic, but you can be a fully athletic team and not win games. And so I think one of the biggest another big reason of why we were so successful was that our team culture was at an all-time high. You know, I mean, if you looked at the players that were in the game and the players that were not in the game, everybody was in the game. You know, our bench crew, they were laying on the ground after a kill. I mean, they were so excited, and everybody was in it and present all the time. And so that, to me, was one of the most exciting things, because I would look down at the bench and it was almost like they were in the game. You know, they were present in the moment, and they were in it. So that was really exciting for all of us, the coaching staff. We just really enjoyed watching them, you know, battle. We battled so hard this year in so many instances, you know, and we would be down by 8 or 9 points, and for some reason, you know, we stayed composed. You know, our leaders stepped in, and we ended up winning those sets, winning the matches. And Jonah, you saw some of these rallies. They were like, I mean, sometimes 15 seconds long. These were like a minute long, and everybody's dying at the end, you know. So that, to me, that's exciting. Being a coach is that just seeing how much they wanted to win and what they were going to do to get it done.
And I feel like identity, having an identity. I remember this was one of the first questions that I ever asked you when I met you. Now, granted, it was early on in the season. Was what's the identity of this team? And at the time, you were kind of a little unsure because it was still percolating. The team was still kind of building on top of itself. Now that you've had a chance to step away from the season, obviously it's still a little bit raw, but now that you're away from it, what do you think the identity was of this team this year?
I think, to put it in a nutshell, there's probably a lot of different words to speak on our identity, and it changed almost every match, and it got better. But I think having a positive environment was big. I could completely tell when our energy level was up and everybody was, cheering for each other and excited. I could tell that we're gonna win those types of games. We're gonna win the game. Hardworking environment. This team was extremely hardworking, and they would hold each other accountable in practice. And that's one of the things that we preach as well, is that it can't always come from the coaches. If we're always the ones, harping on you or trying to get you to do something or, be disciplined, it's not going to work. This has to be a collective effort. And I found that was one of the keys. We, as coaches, we didn't have to necessarily push them in that regard. They were able to hold themselves accountable, which made us able to work on different things to kind of bring us to another level.
And I obviously highlighted some of the highlights of your playing career when I introduced you, but when did you kind of first get involved in volleyball? What initially drew you to the sport?
That's an interesting question, Jonah. So when I was in high school, I actually was in the band, and I was a very good flute player. So we used to have to march in these parades. And one day in the parade, I'm marching, and of course, I'm like 3 heads taller than anybody else. And the volleyball coach got one of his players to approach me and get me to try out for volleyball. And I said, well, if you can get me out of marching in these parades on Saturdays, then I'll play your sport of volleyball. And so that's how it all started, my sophomore year in high school. And, after that, I just really enjoyed the sport. I enjoyed the team type culture. I enjoyed being around a bunch of people and working towards a common goal. So started my sophomore year in high school and has been in volleyball ever since.
And obviously you've been coaching volleyball. Now that you get a chance to see it through a different lens, when you kind of compare the way that the sport was played when you were playing versus how it is now, in your mind, what do you think the biggest difference is, or the biggest differences are?
Well, when I played, it was side out scoring. So we played to 15, and you can only win by, your serve, winning when you're serving. And now with rally scoring, you're basically winning a point or losing a point every single play. So you really have to be pretty accurate and present. Volleyball has become a game where, we're actually getting points off of the opponent's mistakes, where, before we didn't. So I think that there's just a big difference in the way the scoring has happened, the way they call the volleyball game these days, the setting, passing, all that stuff. So there's a lot of differences. The libero is now in the game, where back when I played, we didn't have a libero.
Interesting. And that's kind of interesting, because the libero, to me, now that I've gotten a chance to watch volleyball much more closely, not that I ever thought it was an underrated position. Obviously it isn't, but when you only have 3 touches and the first touch is a defensive dig, to be able to kind of set up your setter perfectly to then run your offensive system, the libero is really crucial to that whole offensive piece. So you touched on culture, and obviously establishing culture is so difficult. And when you took over the program in 2019, obviously that was your first season. In 2020, you didn't have a season due to COVID. And so when you really look at your timeline, obviously it's your 5th season with the Broncos altogether, a couple years as an assistant, but this was really your 2nd full season as a head coach when you consider the fact that last season didn't happen at all, and you took over for a legend at Pomona in Rosie Wiegrich, who was the head coach for 27 seasons. And yet the turnaround, what you were able to accomplish from 2019 to this season was enormous. And to me, just the tip of the iceberg in what you will end up accomplishing with Cal Poly Pomona. When you kind of think back, when you think about the culture that you're trying to foster, that you're trying to cultivate, what are your goals for this program, and what's the kind of culture? You touched on it a little bit, but what are the goals for you for this program, and what's the type of culture that you're trying to cultivate with Cal Poly Pomona?
In 2018, we had a really successful season. That was Rosie's last year. And I always tease her because I'll tell her, I'll say, Rosie, you graduated everybody, and you graduated everybody left me, in 2019. And so, 2019, we had a few returners, and we had actually 10 newcomers. So I knew that year was going to be a little bit difficult on a lot of levels. And one, it's hard just to get to know your team when you have so little time in August, before the season starts. So we went through the season. Obviously, we're not that successful. We had some battles. We won some nice games, but we weren't where we wanted to be. And then COVID hit in 2020, and we decided that, how we're going to make this program better is by becoming closer as a unit during this time. This is all we have was Zoom. All we had was Zoom. And so the players, they committed to doing things on their own and getting to the point to where they didn't want to go through 2019 again. None of us did. None of us did. And so here we are in 2021, and nobody could have forecasted this season. You just never know how the cards are going to play out. But I'll tell you, these players did the work that they needed to do during COVID to set the table for themselves to be successful. So for me, I feel that Cal Poly Pomona is an institution that we can recruit the highest level athletes there. I mean, the community's great, the university's awesome, and one of my goals for this program is to win a national title, and I truly believe we can do it. And so recruiting is at an all-time high. Finding players that are going to fit the Cal Poly Pomona volleyball identity. Players that are going to be hardworking, players that want to win, that genuinely love volleyball. So those are some goals for me. We have to graduate our kids. It's not just about volleyball. I mean, a lot of these players are not going to go play professionally. So we want to make sure that not only are they going to be successful on the court, but they're going to be successful in life. At graduating from Cal Poly, you're almost guaranteed to get a job. It's a great school. And so those are some goals that I have for the program.
And what's great too, from, again, my limited time being with the program, with the university, is how invested they are in their athletic department, in trying to recruit the highest athletes, in investing in broadcasting, investing in personnel, investing in these types of things, which is very unique because not all athletic departments are willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is. And they do a great job of that. So, and for me, I always admired volleyball from afar, but I can't honestly say that I have as much appreciation for the sport, or that I had as much appreciation for the sport at the start of the season as I do now. I don't think I fully understand or understood and appreciated it the way that I do now. And from your perspective, you've been around the game forever, your whole life. Where do you think the popularity level is with regard to volleyball right now? And where would you like to see it, or how would you like to see it continue to grow?
I think to put it in perspective, when we were playing in the national title match in '93, we had a record attendance of, I think it was a little over 11,000. And now they're pulling probably double that attendance, maybe close to double to that attendance in the national final matches now. So I think just within that time frame, volleyball has grown. And Where we're seeing a lot of growth is in the youth volleyball, the club system. There are so many volleyball clubs out there. So the opportunities for young girls to play volleyball and to get started at a young age, they're out there. They're everywhere, which is really good, and it's growing our sport. So I think I'd like to see it continue to grow, but I think it is going to continue to grow, at a rapid pace.
And it's interesting because for me, my alma mater is the University of Wisconsin, and that was one of the first sports that I actually got the privilege of calling, was a Wisconsin volleyball match. Now, at the time, they were just kind of breaking into the top 25. They had just scratched the surface. And then, of course, as I matriculated and as I moved on to California, they became a national title contender. And obviously last year they reached the final. So I was very invested in them. Okay, final question for you is, and I didn't tell you about this one, any pregame rituals or pregame superstitions you have, whether it was when you were a player or whether it is when you are a coach? Are you big into superstitions or pregame meals or rituals like that?
I'm really not big on the superstitions. Like, do I have to, touch the ceiling or something before I walk through the door? Nothing like that. But we do have a team routine that we go through, and I do like to keep that pretty on point. We'll do our serve and pass at a certain time, and right after that we do our team meal. After that, the kids know that they go do their own thing, whether it's training room, whether it's they go listen to their music, whatever, and then we come together and we meet again for a little report, and then we go to battle. So, the routine starts probably about a couple hours prior to the match.
I like that because, sometimes coaches will have some, I know a lot of athletes, like they got to put on a certain sock on their left foot first and then the right foot and then the left shoe and the right shoe. So, you never know. You never really can quite tell. Well, Coach, thank you so much for joining me. I know you've got a really busy schedule. I know you've got different things to attend to, so I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jonah. I really appreciate it. And the whole season, just you calling our games has been amazing. And just hearing from our fans, they love you. They loved watching our games on the internet, and a lot of that had to do with you. So we appreciate you.
Thank you so much. All right, I'll let you go. That's Coach Traci Dahl. Thank you so much, Coach.
Bye. Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Okay.
All right. Great to have Coach Dahl on with me. Again, I really had the pleasure of getting a chance to see them broadcast, and you never really know what to expect at the start of a season. You kind of just hope for the best, hope for some big expectations, and when they over-deliver, that's the most rewarding feeling. That's absolutely the most rewarding feeling. Okay, final topic, and then my Malkin's moments. I wanted to touch on this quickly. I was going to touch on this before the interview with Coach Dahl, but I'm doing this now. I just want to give some quick thoughts. The Rams and the Cardinals, they faced off on Monday Night Football a couple nights ago, and they beat the Cardinals on the road 30-23. So it's easy to overreact to NFL games because of how infrequent they are. NFL games take place just once every weekend, and you got about 16 or 17 of them per season. Obviously, it used to be 16, now it's 17. So it is easy to overanalyze and jump to the conclusion that a single game is a microcosm for that team's entire season. That's what we do. We say, we kind of over-embellish or we under-embellish and say this loss means that they are going to lose the rest of the season. We heard people say that about the Packers when they lost the opening game of the season to the Saints. We heard the same thing about the Bills when they lost to the Steelers in week 1. We try to encapsulate one game and blow it out of proportion. And while I don't necessarily think that people were always doing that with the Rams, I do think that the confidence with the team had wavered to a great extent. I think that there were a lot of question marks in that building. There was a lot of cause for concern and skepticism surrounding whether or not they could kind of spin out of this funk. They had lost 3 straight games because prior to this win on Monday night, they struggled against the good teams, to put it bluntly. They were 1-4 against teams with an above 500 record. With an above 500 record. They were 6-0 against teams with a sub 500 record. Now, obviously, at the time that they played the San Francisco 49ers, they were a sub 500 team. Now they are an above 500 team. Same thing with the Colts. The last time they collected a marquee victory was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 3 of the season. They beat the Colts on the road in week 2 of the season. This is a much different Colts team than back then than they are right now. But what Monday night did was it restored confidence in the Rams. It restored the viability of this team and their chances to actually contend for a Super Bowl. That's what it restored. It restored that belief that maybe this team actually can accomplish something. Maybe this team actually can make some noise in the postseason if they were to get there. Because the reality was when they lost to the Cardinals, when they lost to all of these above 500 teams, the Titans, the Packers, their heart was tested. They were bludgeoned, absolutely bludgeoned by the Packers in that loss. I mean, they just couldn't hold a candlestick. Same thing with the 49ers. They were beat down, they were stomped on. And offensively, they struggled. Finally, we saw Matthew Stafford in another game with bright lights. This time he delivered, which again hadn't always been the case. He delivered against the Colts. He delivered against the Bucs. But then we kind of saw him dissipate a little bit. And he finally snapped out of this 5 picks in 3 games, 3 consecutive games of pick sixes funk. And he actually delivered on Monday night. It was tremendous. 287 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He was accurate. He made sound decisions, no turnovers. That's what we need. That's what the Rams needed from him. And more importantly, they got production out of Odell Beckham Jr. Now he is starting to produce. He's starting to get more comfortable in the system. The rapport between him and Matthew Stafford is only strengthening every single game that they play together. And the difficulty with Odell Beckham Jr. was never about his talent. It was, okay, how would he replace Robert Woods given their stylistically different approaches and positions to football? Robert Woods did most of his damage up the seams in the slot. He wasn't a deep route runner. He was kind of a short crossing route runner with slants over the middle. That's what made him and Cooper Kupp such a dynamic duo. Odell Beckham Jr., he's a legit wideout. He's a deep route runner. He's a deep threat playmaker. And now he's kind of having to shift himself into operating a little bit more in the slot, operating a little bit more up the seams, shorter routes, which is not something that he's always been used to. And the familiarity between him and Matthew Stafford hadn't always been there. It's starting to get there now. But perhaps most importantly, what's finally changed is the physicality level of the Rams. They are starting to play a lot more physically. They're starting to induce a lot more pain. They're meeting the opponents at the point of attack. Defensively, they were incredible on Monday night. They were wreaking havoc up front. They ended up turning over Kyler Murray twice on interceptions. They forced a fumble. They sacked him 4 times, 6 tackles for loss. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. Aaron Donald was an absolute monster, pushing offensive linemen back into Kyler Murray. The hardest thing to do is to push another man against his own will. That's so difficult to do. And Aaron Donald had 3 sacks, was just all over the place, was absolutely just hellacious up front. And he was a problem, and that was great to see for the Rams because they needed that defensive performance, and they were able to run the football. And that physicality carried over into the run game that they were finally able to establish. Sony Michel was picking up hard-earned first downs, hard-earned carries and touches. That's what they needed. That's what they were lacking for the longest time. So this win was huge because obviously the Rams season was ebbing and flowing. And one week they look great. The next week they look kind of like barely a top 10 team. And it keeps them in the divisional hunt because now it gives them a shot at winning the division. They're only a game behind the Cardinals. And when you look at both of the schedules for both teams, Rams could easily win all 4 games. Cardinals might slip up. You never know. It gives them an outside shot at collecting the best overall record in the conference. But I think most importantly, it solidifies themselves as a 3rd or 4th best team in the NFC. I think that they and the Cowboys and Cardinals can kind of be clumped together. I think that they're right below right now. The Bucs and the Packers, I think, are the 2 best teams in the NFL as we speak. So I just think, and the Packers obviously shellacked them. They beat the Bucs. The Rams beat the Bucs, but the Packers look like the best team in the NFL still. But I think that both they and the Bucs are just on a slightly different level at the moment. But again, big win for the Rams. They obviously have another huge test in their season finale against the 49ers at home. That will be a game that we'll be paying attention to because Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan has kind of bested Sean McVay and the Rams a lot over the course of their times in the NFC West together. So, but for the most part, though, this win kind of returns them to a bit of relevancy. And that was important to see. Okay. Final topic, my Malkin's moments. I have some great Malkin's moments for you. This is truly just a barrage of accolades to hand out. Have to start nowhere else with Steph Curry passing Ray Allen to set the all-time record for the most three-pointers made in NBA history. Ray Allen held the record for a decade over Reggie Miller with 2,973. And Steph Curry surpassed him and now is at 2,977 and counting. And I have a hard time believing that someone is going to catch that record. Records technically are meant to be broken, but the torrid pace that Curry is on, I have a hard time envisioning a scenario in which another player with the same accuracy, the same volume, sure, but the same accuracy can come around and score in the same manners that this guy can. It was a really emotional, touching moment to see him accomplish that achievement last night, and a big shout out to him. He deserves to be my top Malkin's moment. Another Malkin's moment, J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith received a 4.0 GPA in his first ever college semester at North Carolina A&T State University, an HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina. Initially, he enrolled there to be able to play collegiate golf, but he also attained a 4.0 GPA, and he was emotional in a little kind of Instagram live tribute. And shout out to J.R. Smith. That's an impressive accomplishment, and especially for someone that didn't really go to college, for him to accomplish that, congrats to him. That's a major, major milestone in his life. Bryce Young won the Heisman. Again, this is a long Malkin's moments because I didn't have a show Monday. Bryce Young winning the Heisman, becoming the first ever Alabama quarterback to win the Heisman. We all thought Mac Jones might have been able to win it last year, but nope. Devontae Smith, which makes now Bryce Young the second consecutive Crimson Tide to win the Heisman Trophy. He had 43 touchdown passes, 4,322 passing yards. He won the AP Player of the Year award. He finished just ahead of Michigan's Aiden Hutchinson for that award. And again, he also won the Davey O'Brien Award for the nation's top quarterback over Kenny Pickett at Pittsburgh and C.J. Stroud of Ohio State. Going a little bit more into the Big Ten, Michigan State's Kenneth Walker III won the Doak Walker Award for the nation's best running back. It's the first time ever that a Michigan State Spartan has won that award. The guy had a tremendous season, over 1,600 rushing yards, 18 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown as well. Michigan State finished 10-2, had a great season. They're going to compete against Pittsburgh in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which is going to be a tremendous matchup, Big Ten against ACC. So shout out to him. Shout out to Georgia's defensive tackle, Jordan Davis, for winning the Bednarik Award for the nation's top defensive player. Obviously, he captained He captained that Georgia Bulldogs team that held opponents to under 10 points per game. Just an absolute force up front. Georgia still qualified for the college football playoff despite the loss to Alabama, and he's been a big reason why. Big shout out to him. Couple more. Tom Brady recorded his 700th touchdown. The first quarterback ever, the first player in NFL history to record 700 touchdowns. And of course, it was only fitting that it came against the Buffalo Bills, the team that he's had the most success against over the course of his career. And now Tom Brady, it's amazing what this guy has been able to do, because now he's the NFL's all-time leader in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and completions. The guy just ceases to amaze. He continues just to execute at such a high level, which is so hard to do, and yet we have to have so much appreciation for him. Max Verstappen won the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, captured his first ever Formula One World Championship. He had to pass Lewis Hamilton late to win that award. And finally, I am trying to pull up this video for you to see. So in college basketball, very rarely do we see unranked teams knock off top teams in the nation. We rarely get a chance to see that. And last week, we saw Rutgers pull off one of the most unbelievable performances in a stunner against Purdue. I'm trying to pull this video up. Ron Harper Jr. hit a half-court shot with 3.4 seconds left to win it. The impressive thing about this game, as I'm going to pull this up for you right now, is that the last 20 seconds are what were unbelievable, because Ron Harper Jr. hit a jumper with 13 seconds left, gave Rutgers a 67-66 advantage. Then after that, Purdue comes down the other way, hits a shot with 3.4 seconds left, and give the Boilermakers a 68-67 lead with 3.4 seconds left. And Ron Harper has got to go the length of the floor. As I'm pulling this up for you, I'm going to pull this up right now. See if I can forward. We'll start with this.
Guarded by Morton, drives it on him. Pivots, fades, got it!
So that's the shot by Harper to give Rutgers a 1-point lead. Okay, 67-66. Here comes Purdue. So Purdue's up by 3, up by 1. And then this. Unbelievable shot. It's the first time ever that Purdue has knocked off the number 1 team in the nation. And that was the first time that Purdue was ranked number 1 in quite some time. Okay, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah-Malkin or at morning_Joe_. Follow me on Instagram, JMalkin97, or TikTok, Jonah Malkin. That's my username on TikTok. But as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.